The rain was falling hard that November evening when Sarah Mitchell sat in her modest one-bedroom apartment in downtown Chicago, scrolling through her phone while eating leftover takeout from a paper container. The sound of her upstairs neighbor's television echoed through the thin walls, mixing with the distant hum of traffic outside her window. She had grown accustomed to these sounds over the past 3 years, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of urban life that surrounded her small but cozy home. Her phone buzzed with a video call notification, and she saw her sister Jennifer's name flash across the screen. Sarah smiled, genuinely excited to catch up with her older sister who lived in the affluent suburb of Winnetka, about an hour north of the city. Jennifer had always been the successful one in the family, married to a corporate executive, living in a sprawling colonial house with perfectly manicured lawns and a 3-car garage. Despite their different paths in life, Sarah had always looked up to her sister and cherished their relationship. "Hey Jen." Sarah answered cheerfully, adjusting her phone so Jennifer could see her better. "How are things going? I haven't heard from you in weeks." Jennifer's face appeared on the screen, her blonde hair perfectly styled even though it was past 8 o'clock in the evening. She was sitting in what appeared to be her home office, with expensive-looking artwork visible in the background. "Oh Sarah, things are wonderful here. Michael just got another promotion at the firm and we're thinking about renovating the kitchen again. You know how it is." Sarah nodded enthusiastically, genuinely happy for her sister's continued success. "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you both. Things are going well here too. I just got a small raise at the marketing firm and I'm really enjoying city life. There's something magical about being right in the heart of everything, you know?" As they continued chatting, Sarah gave Jennifer a virtual tour of her apartment, proudly showing off the small improvements she had made over the months. She had painted the walls a warm cream color, hung some artwork she had found at local thrift stores, and arranged her furniture to maximize the limited space. The apartment wasn't large, but it was hers and she had worked hard to make it feel like home. Jennifer's expression gradually changed as Sarah moved the phone around, showing her the compact kitchen with its older appliances, the small living area that doubled as her workspace, and the single bedroom with its narrow closet. What started as polite interest began to shift into something that made Sarah feel increasingly uncomfortable. "Sarah, sweetie," Jennifer finally said, her tone taking on a condescending quality that Sarah hadn't heard before. "Don't you think this place is a bit, well, cheap? I mean, look at those cabinets, they're practically falling apart. And is that wallpaper peeling in the corner?" Sarah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and hurt. She looked around her apartment with fresh eyes, suddenly seeing it through Jennifer's critical gaze. The cabinet doors did have some wear around the handles, and there was indeed a small section where the wallpaper had begun to lift near the window. But these imperfections had never bothered her before. They were simply part of the character of an older building in an established neighborhood. "I know it's not as fancy as your place," Sarah replied quietly, trying to keep the hurt out of her voice. "But it's what I can afford right now and I actually love living here. The location is perfect and there's so much culture and energy in this neighborhood." Jennifer let out a little laugh that struck Sarah like a physical blow. "Oh honey, I'm not trying to be mean. I just think you're settling for less than you deserve. This place looks like something a college student would live in, not a grown woman with a career. Have you considered moving somewhere more respectable? Maybe out to the suburbs where you could get more space for your money?" The conversation continued for another few minutes, but Sarah found herself becoming more and more withdrawn as Jennifer made additional comments about the cheapness of her living situation. Her sister pointed out the outdated fixtures, the small windows, and even made a remark about how the building looked run down from what she could see through the background of their video call. After they hung up, Sarah sat in the silence of her apartment, feeling a mixture of anger, hurt, and determination that she had never experienced before. Jennifer's words echoed in her mind, particularly the way she had emphasized the word cheap with such disdain. For the first time in years, Sarah looked around her home and felt ashamed instead of proud. "Hi everyone, this is Tina, your friend who's here to share another incredible story that will touch your heart and maybe even inspire you to see life from a different perspective. Today I'm bringing you a tale about family, success, and what happens when someone underestimates the quiet strength of those they love most. You're going to witness an amazing transformation that proves sometimes the people who seem to have the least are actually capable of the most extraordinary things." Stay with me until the very end because this story has a twist that will leave you speechless and maybe even cheering out loud. Before we dive in, please hit that like button and consider subscribing if you enjoy stories that remind us of the power of determination and the unexpected ways life can surprise us. The following morning, Sarah woke up with Jennifer's words still ringing in her ears. She made her coffee in her cheap kitchen and looked out her small windows at the bustling street below. But instead of feeling defeated, something had shifted inside her during the night. A spark of determination had ignited, fueled by years of quietly building her career while her sister lived comfortably on her husband's success. Sarah had never told Jennifer the full truth about her work situation. While her sister assumed she was just another mid-level marketing employee, Sarah had actually been developing her own digital marketing consultancy on the side for the past 2 years. What had started as freelance work to supplement her income had grown into a thriving business with several high-profile clients. She had been modest about her success, preferring to let her work speak for itself rather than boasting about her achievements. As she got ready for work that morning, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She pulled out her laptop and began researching the building she lived in. The Grandview Apartments was a classic Chicago building from the 1920s, with beautiful architectural details and a prime location in Lincoln Park. Despite Jennifer's harsh words, Sarah had always appreciated the building's character and history. After some digging through public records, Sarah discovered something interesting. The building was owned by Westfield Property Management, a company that owned several rental properties throughout the city. More importantly, she learned that Westfield was actually a subsidiary of a larger real estate investment firm that had been struggling financially in recent months. During her lunch break, Sarah made a series of phone calls. Her business had been generating significantly more income than she had let on to anyone, including her family. She had been living modestly while saving and investing most of her earnings, building a substantial financial portfolio that few people knew about. Her accountant had been encouraging her to diversify her investments, and suddenly Sarah saw the perfect opportunity. By the end of the week, Sarah had arranged a meeting with a commercial real estate broker who specialized in apartment buildings. She learned that Westfield Property Management was indeed looking to sell several of their properties, including the Grandview Apartments. The asking price was substantial, but well within Sarah's capability, especially considering the strong rental income the building generated. The broker, a seasoned professional named Robert Chin, was initially skeptical when this young woman in jeans and a casual blazer inquired about purchasing an entire apartment building. His skepticism quickly disappeared when Sarah provided her financial documentation and pre-approval letters from 3 different commercial lenders. "Ms. Mitchell," Robert said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed her paperwork, "I have to say this is quite impressive. Most people your age are looking at condos or single-family homes, not investment properties of this scale. What's driving your interest in this particular building?" Sarah smiled, thinking of Jennifer's cutting remarks about her cheap apartment. "Let's just say I have a personal connection to the property, and I believe it has tremendous potential that the current owners aren't fully realizing." The negotiation process took 3 weeks. Sarah discovered that Westfield was more motivated to sell than they had initially let on. The company was facing pressure from their parent firm to liquidate underperforming assets, and the Grandview Apartments, while profitable, wasn't meeting their aggressive growth targets. Sarah used this to her advantage, negotiating not only a favorable purchase price but also favorable terms that would allow her to take possession quickly. Throughout this entire process, Sarah continued her normal routine, going to work at the marketing firm during the day and building her consultancy in the evenings. She didn't tell anyone about her real estate venture, not her coworkers, not her friends, and certainly not her family. She wanted to wait until everything was finalized before sharing the news. The closing took place on a crisp December morning in a downtown law office. Sarah sat across from the Westfield representatives, signing document after document that officially transferred ownership of the 40-unit apartment building to her personally. When the final signature was complete, she walked out of that office as the owner of the very building that Jennifer had dismissed as cheap. But Sarah's plan was just beginning. That evening, she researched Jennifer's living situation in Winnetka. Her sister and brother-in-law rented their impressive colonial house from a company called Suburban Property Holdings. Sarah had assumed they owned their home, given how often Jennifer spoke about renovations and improvements, but the public records told a different story. As it turned out, Suburban Property Holdings was also facing financial difficulties. The company had overextended itself during the housing boom and was now looking to sell off properties to manage their debt load. Sarah's broker, Robert, confirmed that several properties owned by Suburban were on the market, including the house that Jennifer and Michael were renting. My dear friends, I want to pause here for a moment because this story is touching something deep in my heart, and I have a feeling it's doing the same for you. We all know what it feels like to have someone we love make us feel small or inadequate, don't we? But what I love about Sarah's story is that she didn't let those hurtful words break her down. Instead, she used them as fuel to build something amazing. If this story is resonating with you, please take a second to subscribe to our channel because I promise you, we're just getting started, and you won't want to miss how this incredible journey unfolds. Also, I'd love to hear from you in the comments about a time when someone underestimated you and how you proved them wrong. The week before Christmas, Sarah received the call she had been waiting for. Robert Chen's voice was filled with excitement as he delivered the news that would set her plan in motion perfectly. "Sarah, you're not going to believe this," Robert said over the phone. "Suburban Property Holdings just listed the Winnetka property we discussed. The one where your sister lives. They're asking for a quick sale, and given your proven track record with the Grandview purchase, I think you'd be their ideal buyer." Sarah felt her pulse quicken as she processed this information. The house that Jennifer was so proud of, the one she had used as a measuring stick to judge Sarah's cheap apartment, was about to become available for purchase. The irony was almost too perfect to be true. "What's their timeline?" Sarah asked, already mentally calculating her available resources. "They want to close before the end of the year for tax purposes," Robert explained. "It's a motivated seller situation, which means there's room for negotiation on price. Plus, since there are existing tenants with a lease in place, it's essentially a turnkey investment property." Over the next few days, Sarah dove deep into the financial analysis of the Winnetka property. The house was beautiful, there was no denying that, but it was also overpriced for the rental income it generated. Jennifer and Michael were paying premium rent for the prestige of the address, but from an investment standpoint, the numbers were less impressive than her Lincoln Park building. Still, Sarah wasn't making this decision purely based on financial metrics. There was something deeply satisfying about the prospect of becoming Jennifer's landlord, especially after the way her sister had dismissed her living situation. It wasn't about revenge exactly, but rather about proving a point that had been years in the making. The negotiation process for the Winnetka house moved much faster than the apartment building had. Suburban Property Holdings was clearly in distress, and Sarah's all-cash offer with a flexible closing timeline made her an attractive buyer. Within 2 weeks, she had a signed purchase agreement and was just days away from closing. During this time, Sarah had several phone conversations with Jennifer, who was completely oblivious to what was happening behind the scenes. Her sister complained about various issues with their rental house, from a slow-draining bathroom sink to a temperamental garage door opener. "The property management company is so unresponsive," Jennifer grumbled during one of their calls. "We've been calling about these repairs for weeks and they keep giving us the runaround. Sometimes I think we should just buy our own place, but Michael says the market is too uncertain right now." Sarah listened with growing amusement, knowing that very soon Jennifer's complaints would be directed at her. "Have you considered talking directly to the property owner?" Sarah suggested innocently. "Sometimes going above the management company can get better results." "Oh, we have no idea who actually owns this place," Jennifer replied dismissively. "It's probably some big corporation or wealthy investor who doesn't care about individual tenants. That's the problem with renting from these large companies, you know? There's no personal connection or accountability." The closing for the Winnetka property took place on December 22nd, just 3 days before Christmas. Sarah signed the final documents with a sense of anticipation that had been building for weeks. As she walked out of the title company's office, she was officially the owner of her sister's home. But Sarah wasn't ready to reveal her new status as Jennifer's landlord just yet. She had a more dramatic plan in mind, one that would make the revelation even more impactful. She contacted the property management company that had been handling the house and informed them of the ownership change. She also made it clear that she wanted to be personally involved in all tenant communications going forward. 2 days after Christmas, Jennifer called Sarah in a state of frustration. "You won't believe what happened," Jennifer said, her voice tight with annoyance. We got a letter from the property management company saying that our house has been sold to a new owner. They want to schedule a meeting with us next week to discuss the transition. That's interesting, Sarah replied, working hard to keep her voice neutral. Did they say who the new owner is? No, just that it's a private investor who wants to meet with all the tenants personally, Jennifer said with obvious irritation. Honestly, I'm worried they're going to raise our rent or make us sign a new lease with worse terms. The timing couldn't be worse with Michael's company going through reorganization. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for her sister's stress, but she also felt a surge of excitement about the meeting that was about to take place. I'm sure it will work out fine, she said reassuringly. Maybe the new owner will be more responsive to maintenance requests than the previous company was. I doubt it, Jennifer replied pessimistically. These investor types are usually just looking to maximize profits. They don't care about tenants who have been taking good care of the property. After they hung up, Sarah began preparing for what would undoubtedly be one of the most memorable conversations of her life. She had spent weeks planning how to reveal her identity as the new property owner, and she wanted the moment to be perfect. She decided to schedule the meeting at the house itself, arriving as a professional property owner making an introductory visit to her tenants. The appointment was set for January 3rd at 7 p.m. Sarah chose the evening timing deliberately, knowing that both Jennifer and Michael would be home from work and available for a comprehensive discussion about the property transition. She also wanted the gravitas of an evening business meeting to add to the formality of the occasion. On the morning of January 3rd, Sarah took extra care with her appearance. She chose a professional navy suit, styled her hair in a sleek bun, and carried a leather portfolio filled with property documents. She wanted to look every inch the successful real estate investor that she had become, quite different from the sister who lived in the cheap apartment that Jennifer had criticized just 2 months earlier. As she drove from Lincoln Park to Winnetka that evening, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Jennifer's harsh words about her apartment had stung deeply, but they had also awakened something powerful within her. For too long, Sarah had allowed others to define her success based on external appearances rather than actual achievements. The colonial house in Winnetka looked exactly as Sarah remembered from Jennifer's video calls, with its perfectly maintained landscaping and impressive facade illuminated by elegant outdoor lighting. As she parked her car in the circular driveway, Sarah could see warm light glowing from the front windows, and she imagined Jennifer and Michael inside, probably discussing their concerns about meeting their mysterious new landlord. Sarah took a deep breath and walked to the front door, her professional heels clicking confidently on the brick walkway. She carried herself with the poise of someone who belonged in this upscale neighborhood, which, as the property owner, she now did. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was about to enter the house that Jennifer had used as evidence of Sarah's inadequate lifestyle choices. She rang the doorbell and waited, hearing footsteps approaching from inside. The door opened to reveal Michael, Jennifer's husband, dressed in business casual attire and wearing a slightly anxious expression. "Good evening," Michael said politely, extending his hand for a handshake. "You must be the new property owner. I'm Michael Patterson, and my wife Jennifer should be down in just a moment." "Good evening, Michael," Sarah replied, shaking his hand firmly while maintaining her professional demeanor. "Thank you for making time to meet with me this evening." Michael stepped aside to let her enter, and Sarah walked into the spacious foyer with its gleaming hardwood floors and crystal chandelier. The house was even more impressive in person than it had appeared in the background of Jennifer's video calls. Every detail spoke of expensive taste and careful maintenance, from the crown molding to the designer furniture visible in the adjacent living room. "Can I offer you something to drink?" Michael asked, gesturing toward the living room. "Coffee, tea, or perhaps some water?" "Water would be perfect, thank you," Sarah replied, following him into the elegantly appointed living room. She chose a seat on the cream-colored sofa, placing her leather portfolio on the coffee table with deliberate precision. Just as Michael returned with her water, Sarah heard familiar footsteps on the staircase. Jennifer appeared at the top of the stairs, looking polished and professional in a cashmere sweater and well-tailored slacks. She was obviously making an effort to present herself well to their new landlord, which made what was about to happen even more significant. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Jennifer said as she descended the stairs. I was just finishing up a call with my mother about New Year's plans. She reached the bottom of the stairs and turned toward the living room, her welcoming smile freezing on her face as she saw who was sitting on her sofa. The silence that followed was profound. Jennifer stood motionless in the doorway, her mouth slightly open, staring at Sarah as if she were seeing a ghost. Michael looked confused, glancing between his wife and their visitor with growing bewilderment. "Hello, Jennifer," Sarah said calmly, maintaining her professional composure despite the emotional significance of the moment. "I believe we have some things to discuss about your lease agreement." "Sarah." Jennifer's voice came out as barely a whisper. "What are you doing here? I don't understand." Michael's confusion deepened as he looked at his wife's shocked expression. "Wait, you two know each other? Jennifer, what's going on?" Sarah opened her portfolio and pulled out the property deed, placing it on the coffee table where both Jennifer and Michael could see it clearly. "Jennifer, Michael, I'd like to formally introduce myself as the new owner of this property. I completed the purchase on December 22nd, and I'm here tonight to discuss the transition and your continued tenancy." Jennifer sank into the nearest chair as if her legs could no longer support her. She stared at the document on the coffee table, her eyes scanning the official language that confirmed Sarah's ownership. "This can't be real," she said, shaking her head slowly. "Sarah, how is this possible? You live in that tiny apartment downtown. How could you possibly afford to buy this house?" The question hung in the air, and Sarah could see the exact moment when Jennifer began to understand the implications of what was happening. All of those comments about Sarah's cheap lifestyle, all of the condescending advice about finding a more respectable living situation, had been based on completely false assumptions about Sarah's actual financial situation. Michael was still trying to process the revelation. "Jennifer, this is your sister? The one who works in marketing?" He looked back and forth between them, clearly struggling to understand how Sarah had gone from being the sister with the modest apartment to being their landlord. "Yes," Sarah replied, addressing Michael's question while keeping her eyes on Jennifer. "I do work in marketing, among other things. I've also been building a successful consulting business over the past few years, which has allowed me to invest in real estate. This house is actually my second property purchase in the last 2 months." Jennifer's face had gone pale, and Sarah could see her sister processing not just the shock of the situation, but also the memory of all the things she had said about Sarah's living arrangements. "Your second property?" Jennifer asked weakly. "That's right," Sarah confirmed, allowing herself a small smile. "I also purchased the apartment building where I live. The building you called cheap during our video call in November." The weight of Jennifer's previous words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Sarah could see the exact moment when her sister realized how profoundly she had misjudged the situation, and how her casual cruelty about Sarah's apartment had revealed more about her own character than about Sarah's circumstances. Michael was beginning to understand the family dynamics at play, and his expression shifted from confusion to something approaching embarrassment. "Jennifer, what exactly did you say about Sarah's apartment?" Jennifer couldn't meet either of their eyes. She stared down at her hands, her usual confidence completely shattered. The sister who had been so quick to judge Sarah's lifestyle choices was now confronting the reality that Sarah had been quietly building a real estate empire while Jennifer was simply paying rent with her husband's income. "I think," Sarah said gently, her voice carrying a mixture of firmness and compassion, "we need to have a conversation about respect, assumptions, and what it really means to be successful." The silence in the elegant living room stretched on as Jennifer struggled to find words that could somehow address the magnitude of her misjudgment. Sarah watched her sister's internal battle with a mixture of satisfaction and genuine concern. This moment of revelation was exactly what she had hoped for, but seeing Jennifer's distress also awakened her deeper feelings of sisterly love. Michael cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the tension between the two women. "Perhaps I should give you both some privacy to talk," he offered, starting to rise from his chair. "Please stay, Michael," Sarah said firmly but kindly. "This affects both of you, and I think it's important that we all understand where we stand moving forward." Jennifer finally looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sarah, I don't know what to say. I was so wrong about everything. When I saw your apartment on that video call, I just assumed—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "You assumed that because my living space didn't look like yours, it meant I was unsuccessful," Sarah finished for her. You judged my entire life based on the age of my kitchen cabinets and the size of my windows, without ever asking about my actual circumstances or goals. The truth of those words hit Jennifer like a physical blow. She had indeed made sweeping assumptions about her sister's life, using her own definition of success as the only valid measure. I was trying to help, Jennifer said weakly, though even as she spoke she realized how hollow that excuse sounded. Help. Sarah's voice carried a note of controlled emotion that made both Jennifer and Michael shift uncomfortably. You told me my home was cheap, that it looked like a college student's apartment, that I was settling for less than I deserved. You laughed at my living situation, Jennifer. How exactly was that helping? Michael looked at his wife with something approaching disappointment. In all their years together he had never seen this side of Jennifer, the side that could be so casually cruel to someone she claimed to love. Jennifer, please tell me you didn't actually say those things to Sarah. Jennifer's tears finally began to flow as she confronted the full reality of her behavior. I did say those things, she admitted, her voice breaking. I said them and I meant them at the time. I thought I was being the successful older sister, giving advice to someone who wasn't living up to her potential. But you never asked about my potential, Sarah pointed out, her voice growing stronger. You never asked about my business, my investments, or my long-term plans. You saw surface appearances and made judgments based on your own narrow definition of what success should look like. The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's phone buzzing with a text message. She glanced at it quickly and saw a message from her property management company about the Lincoln Park building. One of her tenants was requesting permission to install new lighting in their unit, and they were praising Sarah as a responsive and caring property owner who actually listened to their concerns. Sarah smiled slightly as she read the message, then looked back at Jennifer. You know what's interesting? My tenants in that cheap building you criticized actually love living there. They appreciate that I maintain the property well, that I respond quickly to their needs, and that I've created a community where people feel valued and respected. Jennifer wiped her eyes with a tissue that Michael had quietly provided. I can see that now, she said softly. I can see that I was completely wrong about everything. The question is, Sarah continued, what do we do moving forward? I'm now your landlord, which creates a very unusual family dynamic. But more importantly, I need to know if you've learned something from this experience, or if you're just apologizing because the power balance has shifted. Michael spoke up for the first time since the revelation. Sarah, I want you to know that I had no idea Jennifer had said those things to you. If I had known, I would have corrected her immediately. What she said was completely inappropriate and hurtful. Thank you, Michael, Sarah replied, genuinely appreciating his support. But this is really between Jennifer and me. She's the one who needs to decide whether she's ready to see her family members as complex individuals rather than simple reflections of her own status. Jennifer looked around the beautiful living room where they were sitting, perhaps seeing it differently now that she understood it belonged to the sister she had dismissed. Sarah, I know I can't take back what I said, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. Not just because you turned out to be more successful than I realized, but because I hurt someone I love based on shallow assumptions. Sarah studied her sister's face, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus mere embarrassment at being wrong. What she saw was a woman genuinely confronting her own prejudices and character flaws for perhaps the first time in years. I accept your apology, Sarah said finally, but I also need you to understand that our relationship has to change. I can't have a sister who feels free to judge and criticize my choices while expecting unconditional support for her own. Friends, I need to pause here again because this conversation is hitting me right in my heart and I know it's affecting you too. How many times have we all made assumptions about people based on what we can see on the surface? Sarah's story is teaching us something so important about looking deeper, about not judging others by our own narrow definitions of success. If you're finding this story as powerful as I am, please take a moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because stories like this one remind us of the best and worst parts of human nature. I'd also love to hear in the comments about a time when you surprised someone who underestimated you, or maybe when you learned not to judge others too quickly. Your stories matter to me and they matter to this community we're building together. The atmosphere in the room began to shift as the initial shock wore off and the reality of the new situation settled in. Sarah could see that Jennifer was genuinely processing the implications of what had happened, not just the embarrassment of being wrong, but the deeper questions about her own character and values that this revelation had raised. "Sarah," Jennifer said, her voice steadier now but still filled with emotion, "I need you to know that I've been thinking about our phone call every day since November. Even before I knew about this, I realized that what I said to you was wrong. I was preparing to call you and apologize, but I kept putting it off because I was ashamed of myself." Sarah listened carefully, trying to determine whether this was genuine remorse or simply damage control now that the power dynamic had shifted so dramatically. "What exactly were you ashamed of?" she asked. Jennifer took a deep breath before answering. "I was ashamed that I had become the kind of person who judges others based on their possessions or their living situation. I was ashamed that I had treated my own sister with such disrespect and condescension. And I was especially ashamed because I realized that my comments said much more about my own insecurities than they did about your choices." This admission surprised Sarah, who hadn't expected Jennifer to demonstrate such self-awareness. "What do you mean about your own insecurities?" "I think," Jennifer said slowly as if she was still working through the realization herself, "I've been so focused on maintaining the appearance of success that I've lost sight of what actually matters. When I saw your apartment, it reminded me of the simpler life I used to have before I got caught up in trying to impress everyone with the right address and the right possessions." Michael nodded as his wife spoke, clearly recognizing the truth in her words. "Jennifer's been under a lot of pressure lately," he added gently. "My company's reorganization has been stressful, and she's been worried about maintaining our lifestyle if things don't work out the way we hope." Sarah felt her anger beginning to soften as she understood the broader context of Jennifer's behavior. "So when you called my apartment cheap, you were really expressing anxiety about your own situation?" "I think so," Jennifer admitted. "It was easier to criticize your choices than to examine my own fears about money and status. But that doesn't excuse what I said, Sarah. There's no justification for treating you that way, regardless of what I was dealing with personally." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the grandfather clock in the hallway chiming 8 o'clock. The formal tone reminded everyone that this was still, technically, a business meeting between a landlord and tenants, despite the family relationships involved. Sarah opened her portfolio again and pulled out a folder containing lease documents and property information. "We do need to address the practical aspects of this situation," she said, shifting into a more businesslike tone. "Your current lease runs through August, and I want to assure you both that I have no intention of asking you to move or significantly changing the terms." Michael looked relieved, while Jennifer appeared surprised by Sarah's generosity given the circumstances. "You're not going to raise our rent or anything like that?" Jennifer asked. "I'm going to treat you exactly like I treat all of my tenants," Sarah replied. "Fairly, professionally, and with respect. The rent you're paying is actually above market rate for this area, so if anything I might consider reducing it when your lease comes up for renewal." This revelation clearly shocked both Jennifer and Michael, who had assumed they were getting a good deal on their rental. "Above market rate?" Michael asked, looking confused. Sarah nodded. "The previous owners were charging premium pricing based on the prestige of the neighborhood rather than the actual rental market. As a landlord, I believe in charging fair rates that reflect the true value of the property, not inflated prices that exploit tenants' desire for status." Jennifer's face reddened as she realized the implications of this information. Not only had she been wrong about Sarah's financial situation, but she and Michael had actually been overpaying for their status symbol home while looking down on Sarah's more modest but financially savvy living arrangement. "However," Sarah continued, "I do expect the same things from you that I expect from all my tenants. Respect for the property, timely rent payments, and professional communication about any issues or concerns. Can you both commit to that?" "Of course," Michael replied immediately. "We've always taken good care of this place and we appreciate you being so reasonable about everything." Jennifer nodded as well, though Sarah could see that her sister was still processing the full magnitude of how wrong she had been about everything. "Sarah, I want you to know that I understand now that you didn't need my advice about your living situation. You were making smart financial decisions while I was making assumptions based on appearances." Sarah closed her portfolio and leaned back in her chair, studying both of their faces. "This has been an educational evening for all of us," she said finally. "Jennifer, I hope you've learned something about making assumptions about people, especially people you care about. And Michael, thank you for being so understanding about this unusual situation." As she prepared to leave, Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions. The satisfaction of proving Jennifer wrong was still there, but it was now tempered by a deeper understanding of her sister's motivations and a genuine hope that their relationship could be rebuilt on a more honest and respectful foundation. "There's one more thing," Sarah said as she stood to gather her things. "I want to invite both of you to visit my cheap apartment sometime soon. Not as your landlord, but as your sister and brother-in-law. I'd like you to see the place through different eyes now that you understand the full story." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they seemed to be tears of gratitude rather than shame. "I would love that, Sarah. I would really love that." 3 weeks later, Jennifer and Michael stood outside the Grandview Apartments in Lincoln Park, contemplating the classic brick facade with completely different eyes than those Jennifer had used to observe through her cell phone screen 2 months earlier. The building presented an impressive solidity and impeccable maintenance, with magnificent architectural details that spoke of its rich history and distinctive character, rather than any impression of precariousness or inadequacy that she had previously formed in her prejudiced mind. Jennifer's heart beat irregularly as she absorbed every detail of the structure she had so vehemently and cruelly despised just a few weeks ago. The double-pane windows gleamed under the golden afternoon light, reflecting the century-old trees that adorned the quiet, tree-lined street. The wrought iron ornaments on the balconies showed exquisite craftsmanship that had certainly been preserved with care and considerable investment over the years. Michael held her hand firmly, offering the silent support she so desperately needed in this moment of deep reflection and genuine regret. Sarah met them in the entrance lobby, which emanated a welcoming and inviting atmosphere, decorated with carefully restored original fixtures and artwork selected with refined taste, creating an environment of comfortable elegance and discreet sophistication that completely belied all the hasty assumptions Jennifer had made. "Welcome to my home," Sarah said with a warm smile, but Jennifer could detect a nuance of caution in her brown eyes, an understandable reserve considering the terrible words she had uttered during that fateful phone call. "Sarah, I need to apologize before anything else," Jennifer began, her voice trembling with genuine emotion as the words came out laden with deep remorse. "I was completely unfair, prejudiced, and cruel to you. I had no right to judge your home, your life, your choices without even knowing the reality. My words were deplorable and inexcusable, and I am deeply ashamed of every syllable I uttered on that terrible day." Sarah remained silent for a long moment, charged with meaning, studying her sister's face with a thoughtful expression. "Jennifer, I appreciate your sincere apologies. I know it wasn't easy to acknowledge your mistakes, much less come here to face the situation personally. This shows a maturity I didn't expect, to be completely honest with you." Michael watched the interaction between the two sisters with careful attention, recognizing the importance of this crucial moment for both of them. He had witnessed Jennifer's anguish over the past few weeks, the sleepless nights filled with regret and the growing determination to make peace with Sarah in a meaningful and lasting way. "May I show you the apartment?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying a complex mixture of hope and hesitation. "I want you to see why this place means so much to me, why I chose to live here with such genuine affection and pride." They walked down the spacious hallway whose original hardwood floors had been masterfully restored, creating a surface that gleamed with natural luster and timeless beauty. The walls were adorned with elegant neutral paint, complemented by classic molding that enhanced the building's historic architecture without compromising its modern functionality. When Sarah opened the door to apartment 4B, Jennifer felt the air escape from her lungs in a combination of admiration and overwhelming shame. The space was absolutely stunning, with high ceilings that created a sense of spaciousness and grandeur, enormous windows that flooded every room with abundant natural light, and decoration that perfectly balanced modern elements with charming vintage touches that gave the environment a unique personality. "Sarah, this is absolutely magnificent," Jennifer murmured, her voice almost inaudible as she walked through the living room, observing every detail with eyes wide with genuine surprise. The gourmet kitchen featured state-of-the-art stainless steel appliances, pristine quartz countertops, and custom cabinets that maximized the available space with impressive functional elegance. The master bedroom was a sanctuary of tranquility, with a spectacular view of Lincoln Park that extended to the distant horizon, while the bathroom had been renovated with luxurious materials that rivaled the finest boutique hotels in the city. Each room revealed the meticulous care and considerable investment that Sarah had dedicated to creating not just a dwelling, but a true home filled with love and attention to detail. How could I have been so blind and arrogant? Jennifer asked herself, tears beginning to form in her eyes as the magnitude of her error became crystal clear. This place is more beautiful and well-maintained than my own house, and I had the audacity to call it cheap and inadequate without even knowing it. Sarah placed a gentle hand on her sister's shoulder, a gesture that carried forgiveness and understanding. Jennifer, we all make mistakes and judge hastily sometimes. What's important is learning from these experiences and growing as people. Your visit today and your sincere apologies mean more to me than you can imagine. Michael finally broke his respectful silence. Sarah, your apartment is truly spectacular. The way you've managed to create this welcoming and sophisticated environment is impressive. Jennifer is right to feel ashamed of her previous comments, but I'm proud of her for having the courage to come here and acknowledge her mistakes publicly. The three people remained on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky with golden and pink hues, while Jennifer reflected on the important lessons she had learned about hasty judgments, genuine humility, and the true value of lasting family relationships that transcend superficial differences and temporary misunderstandings.